Hour 0. The Flash. It begins without warning. At 5:43 a.m. local time, a low-yield nuclear device detonates near the Polish city of Lublin, not far from the Ukrainian border. The blast is smaller than the massive warheads of the Cold War, but its impact is devastating. In a split second, a fireball vaporizes buildings, vehicles, and people within the immediate blast zone. The sky lights up brighter than dawn. Shock waves tear through neighborhoods, flattening homes and scattering debris for kilometers. Communications collapse almost instantly. Power lines are severed, cell towers fried, and emergency services overwhelmed. For survivors, the nightmare has only begun. Hour 1. Confusion and panic. Within an hour, images flood global networks. Grainy cell phone footage, captured before devices went dead, shows a mushroom cloud rising above eastern Poland. Panic spreads in nearby cities. Warsaw, Krakow, and across the border in western Ukraine. Sirens wail, trains jam with fleeing civilians, and roads clog as thousands try to escape what they fear is only the beginning. Polish emergency broadcasts confirm the detonation, but stop short of naming the attacker. The government urges people to seek shelter underground to avoid fallout exposure. But few shelters exist, and most civilians are left scrambling for basements and improvised hiding places. Hour 3. NATO. Shock. At NATO headquarters in Brussels, the emergency red phones are ringing. Intelligence agencies scramble to verify the origin of the strike. Was it a deliberate Russian attack? An accident? Or worse, a rogue actor trying to trigger a global war? Satellite data shows a missile trajectory originating from Russian-controlled territory near Belarus. Analysts confirm it wasn't a Ukrainian misfire or an accident. This was intentional. Behind closed doors, NATO leaders convene under Article 4, the Urgent Consultation Clause. For the first time in history, Article 5, the Collective Defense Mechanism, is not just theoretical. It is on the table. Hour 6. The President speaks. The President of the United States addresses the nation from the Oval Office. His words are grim. A nuclear device has detonated on NATO soil. Poland has been attacked. Let me be clear. NATO will respond. The world holds its breath. Is this the spark of World War III? Financial markets crash instantly. Oil prices skyrocket. Global stock exchanges suspend trading, and supply chains seize up. Panic buying erupts from Los Angeles to London. Supermarkets run dry in hours as families prepare for the unthinkable. Hour 12. Fallout and fear. As daylight fades, radioactive fallout drifts across eastern Poland and into western Ukraine. Radiation monitors sound alarms in neighboring countries. Hospitals already overflowing with burn victims and trauma patients now face a silent, invisible killer. The IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, warns of contamination spreading through farmland, rivers, and towns. Farmers abandon their fields, entire communities evacuate westward, and traffic jams stretch for miles. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Russian state television calls the strike a necessary tactical action. The Kremlin claims it was a warning, not an escalation, a move to demonstrate resolve against NATO's support for Ukraine. But in Warsaw, Brussels, and Washington, it's viewed as nothing short of nuclear aggression. Hour 18. Military mobilization. NATO begins deploying rapid reaction forces. American and British fighter jets scramble from bases in Germany. French and German armored divisions move east toward Poland. Missile defense systems are activated across Europe, and U.S. naval groups in the Atlantic reposition toward the Baltic Sea. At the same time, Russia raises its nuclear alert level. Strategic bombers are seen taxiing on runways, submarines vanish beneath the Arctic, and Moscow issues chilling warnings. Any strike on Russian territory will be met with overwhelming force. The line between deterrence and escalation grows razor thin. Hour 24. A world divided by the end of the first day, the world is split. NATO allies declare full solidarity with Poland. Article 5 discussions intensify, but some leaders urge caution, fearing that a direct military response could spiral into all-out nuclear war. China calls for restraint, offering to mediate. India and Brazil echo similar appeals, but global protests erupt outside Russian embassies with chants of "never again" and "stop the war." Inside Poland, survivors sift through rubble, searching for loved ones. The dead are counted in the thousands, with many more expected from radiation exposure. The horror of a nuclear strike in Europe, something thought impossible since 1945, has become reality. As night falls on day one truth is clear. The next 48 hours will decide whether the world can pull back from the brink or plunge headlong into World War III. Hour 25, NATO on the edge. In Brussels, the North Atlantic Council reconvenes in an emergency night session. The Polish delegation demands immediate activation of Article 5, collective defense. For Warsaw, there is no debate. A nuclear weapon has been detonated on its soil, and NATO must respond. But not every member is ready. Some nations push for restraint, arguing that escalation could trigger a full nuclear exchange. Others insist that if NATO does nothing, the alliance itself will collapse. The meeting drags on through the night, tense and divided. Hour 30, Moscow's message. At dawn in Moscow, the Kremlin releases an official statement. Russia denies targeting civilians, claiming the strike was on a NATO military depot. Western intelligence quickly debunks this. Satellite imagery confirms the blast struck a civilian district. Russian state TV portrays the attack as a warning against Western interference in Ukraine. To many in Europe and the US, it sounds less like justification and more like a threat. More strikes could follow. Hour 36, global fallout. The world reacts in waves. In Washington, Congress convenes in an emergency session. Lawmakers from both parties demand a strong response, while markets crash further. In London and Paris, governments declare that NATO must act or lose credibility. But in Berlin, hesitation grows. German leaders recall their nation's history of war and destruction, warning against rushing into nuclear escalation. Protests erupt in major European capitals, some demanding retaliation, others pleading for peace. Meanwhile, in Asia, China calls for a ceasefire and urges NATO to exercise restraint. Yet, at the same time, Beijing places its own military forces on heightened alert, bracing for fallout if the conflict expands. Hour 40, the refugee crisis. Poland faces a humanitarian catastrophe. Hundreds of thousands flee westward, overwhelming roads, railways, and border crossings into Germany and the Czech Republic. Refugee camps spring up overnight, but food, water, and shelter are scarce. The Polish government warns that radiation exposure is spreading. Farmers abandon fields, entire villages are evacuated, and hospitals run out of iodine tablets. Aid convoys from NATO nations begin arriving, but distribution is chaotic under the threat of more attacks. Hour 42. NATO moves east. As politicians debate, the military acts. NATO mobilizes thousands of troops to Poland and the Baltics. US B-52 bombers arrive in the UK, while French Rafale and British Typhoon fighters patrol Eastern European skies. On the ground, Patriot and THAAD missile defense batteries are rushed into position. In the Baltic Sea, US and NATO warships maneuver closer to Russia's Kaliningrad enclave. Every move is calculated to show strength, but risks triggering a deadly miscalculation. Hour 46, the cyber front. Suddenly, cyber attacks ripple across Europe. Banks in Warsaw and Berlin go offline. Hospitals in Prague and Paris report system crashes, and US power grids experience unexplained disruptions. Western intelligence agencies accuse Russia of opening a new front: hybrid warfare. The cyber attacks fuel panic. Millions can't access bank accounts, flights are grounded, and false emergency alerts spread across cell phones. The sense of crisis deepens. The war isn't just on the battlefield, it's in every home and screen. Hour 48, the brink of Article 5. As the second day ends, NATO stands on the edge of history. Poland repeats its demand for Article 5 to be invoked. The US, UK, and France lean toward action. Germany and a few others hesitate, fearing nuclear escalation. In Washington, the US President convenes the National Security Council. Options are on the table: limited retaliation, conventional strikes on Russian positions, massive deterrence, deployment of nuclear-capable forces to Europe, diplomatic off-ramp, threaten retaliation, but hold fire if Russia backs down. Each path risks catastrophe. As night falls over Europe, the alliance is paralyzed between fear of escalation and fear of collapse. The world waits to see what NATO decides, knowing the next 24 hours will shape the future of the century. Hour 49, the world holds its breath. As dawn breaks on day 3, the world is paralyzed. News anchors speak in hushed tones, stock markets remain frozen, and ordinary people in Europe huddle in basements, unsure if more strikes are coming. In Poland, rescue workers dig through rubble. Radiation levels climb in affected zones, forcing teams into protective suits. The death toll rises into the tens of thousands. For survivors, the trauma of nuclear war has already begun. Hour 52, NATO's decision. In Brussels, NATO leaders convene in the most consequential meeting since the alliance was formed. After hours of debate, the North Atlantic Council agrees. Article 5 is triggered. The official statement is blunt. An attack on one is an attack on all. NATO will respond. Crowds in Warsaw erupt in both relief and fear. Relief that Poland is not alone. Fear that retaliation will ignite a larger nuclear exchange. Hour 55, Moscow's warning. The Kremlin responds within minutes. Russian state TV broadcasts President Putin's chilling words. Any strike on Russian territory will be met with a response beyond imagination. Satellite images confirm Russian missile silos are on high alert. Submarines have left port, and strategic bombers are airborne. The world inches closer to nuclear Armageddon. Hour 60, first moves. NATO's response is carefully calibrated. Rather than striking deep into Russia, alliance forces target Russian military units near Belarus and Kaliningrad, using conventional precision weapons. The goal: punish Moscow, but stop short of total escalation. Explosions ripple across Russian positions as US and European aircraft launch coordinated strikes. Russian air defenses activate, and within hours, footage emerges of dogfights over the Baltic skies. The line has been crossed. NATO and Russia are now in direct military conflict. Hour 64, global reactions. The world scrambles to react. China calls for an emergency UN Security Council session, accusing both sides of dragging humanity to the edge of annihilation. India urges a ceasefire, but secretly orders evacuation plans for its cities. The Middle East braces for oil shocks as prices double overnight, sparking panic in global markets. Meanwhile, protests erupt worldwide. In Berlin, Paris, and New York, demonstrators demand peace. In Warsaw and Kyiv, rallies call for full-scale retaliation. Hour 68, escalation. Spiral, Russia retaliates with conventional strikes on NATO bases in Poland and the Baltics. Explosions hit airfields and supply depots, killing dozens of soldiers. NATO intercepts some missiles, but not all. Cyber warfare intensifies. US financial systems freeze. European rail networks grind to a halt. And fake news floods social media, sowing chaos and confusion. In less than 72 hours, the war has spread from a single nuclear strike to a multi-front conflict spanning land, air, cyberspace, and the global economy. Hour 72, the tipping point. By the third night, humanity stands on a knife's edge. NATO commanders warn that if Russia escalates further, especially with another nuclear strike, the alliance may respond in kind. Behind closed doors, US and European leaders weigh the unthinkable, deploying tactical nuclear weapons. Some argue it's the only way to deter further strikes. Others warn it would doom civilization itself. At the same time, back-channel negotiations begin through neutral countries like Switzerland and Turkey. Diplomats desperately search for an off-ramp, but trust is broken, and the window for peace is closing fast. Outro. The first 72 hours after the nuclear strike on Poland have reshaped the world. NATO has invoked Article 5, Russia has retaliated, and the global system teeters on the brink. History will remember this moment not just for the destruction, but for the choices made in these hours. Choices that could decide whether humanity survives the century. What do you think happens next? Does the spiral continue toward total nuclear war? Or does the world find a way to step